Hey, everybody. Well, as a few of you pointed out over the weekend, I forgot to record an audio version of this essay. I'm sorry, everybody. It's been an incredibly busy few weeks for me, and it just completely flew my mind. But I'm here on a Monday, sitting down and committing myself to finally recording it and getting it out there. I've tried to record this a couple of times already, and I have stumbled just unbelievably, like way more than usual. So I'm going to do this one more time all the way through. And if I stumble over words, I'm sorry, everybody. I am still really working on reading out loud. It's strange that I stumble over words that I myself wrote, but hey, it is what it is. As always, if you want to read along, you can hit the link in the description below this video, or if you are on an audio streamer, you can go to the description and the link will be there. If you're not subscribed to my Substack, please do so. bravenewnormal.substack.com. And yes, I will provide some additional commentary and insight at the end, as I usually do. All right, let's get into it again, once and for all. A mostly peaceful revolution. How the left destroyed the West. At this juncture, it seems a clash is inevitable. We can feel the faint rumbles of a distant train, plumes of smoke appearing above the tree line. In Canada, our government screeched to a halt as the wall of corruption surrounding it closed and made all routes impassable. The ruling Liberal Party has refused to produce documents pertaining to billions of dollars earmarked for sustainable development projects. Conservatives call it the Green Slush Fund. Even our House Speaker, a Liberal with his own controversies, has had to pause in the face of his own party's brazen criminality. Overwhelming malignance. That's the tactic. Somewhere during the last 2 decades, our internal power structures realized that if they broke every law and violated every human right all at the same time, we'd be unable to keep up. They'd be censoring our speech while we were filing affidavits against mask mandates. We were still playing by the rules while they disregarded them completely. We believed the American Constitution and Canadian Charter of Rights were our shield that protected us against tyrannical governments. It never occurred to us that tyranny would ignore the guardrails altogether, and in effect become the exact force those documents were created to repel. I celebrated the night Barack Obama was elected president. After 7 years of looting and slaughter in the Middle East, it appeared the black clouds that billowed from the rubble of the World Trade Center were beginning to part. I believed his message of peace and the hope and change slogans. I fell for the legacy media narrative of a grassroots candidate funded mostly by small donations from motivated citizens, hook, line, and sinker. He was an updated John Kennedy, or more precisely, who Robert Kennedy would have been if he lived long enough to become president. I was naively optimistic. It was a euphoric 24 hours. I often return to Obama in my writing and in the timeline of my numerous political transformations because he underlined a major turning point in my life. I felt personally betrayed when he bailed out Wall Street. It was a moment of concurrent clarity and disillusionment. The Obama we all bought into was a populist radical who would let the banks fail and devote billions to ensuring the American people who stood to lose everything in the process. The Obama we received was a neoconservative sock puppet whose campaign was largely funded by Wall Street and big tech. A president so beholden to these interests his entire administration was handpicked by Citibank. He was no Kennedy. He was another dupe for the military-industrial complex, turning the knobs on hegemonic conquest, albeit a far better spokesman than George W. Bush and profoundly talented liar. He represented the worst of Western superficiality and sociopathic narcissism. It was through Obama that I came to understand what really fuels the American machine, that although the chassis may change shape or design, the engine within stays constant. Henry Kissinger and his ilk were perpetually present, in the form of Dick Cheney, Victoria Nuland, Bill Kristol, and others. They regularly rotate positions both inside and outside of presidential administrations, but they're always in there spinning the wheels. It was bizarre to watch them slide behind the veneer of Obama. I was too young to accurately remember Bill Clinton, so I had always associated them with the right wing, and it was that association that drove me to the left. When the left radicalizes, it's difficult to detect in the early stages. Fascism removes compassion and empathy. Communism amplifies and warps it. Fascism is easier to spot because it's distinctly cold and cruel. Communism is subversive and subtle. It stains the cultural fabric and drips. It promises a better way, a true equalization of every human being. which is an ideal most mindful citizens agree is one we should aspire toward. First, it designates an oppressor, usually the wealthy, or the 1%. They're the tax cheats, the landlords. They have more than everyone else and therefore must have acquired it illegitimately. The rest of society, or the 99%, collectivize and eliminate the wealthy to one extent or another in the name of justice and equity. Then the 99% fractures into subgroups, first by race, then by biological sex, then by sexual orientation, then by gender identity. The groups keep breaking and atomizing into smaller categories, each becoming more exclusive with every division. The purpose is to create a never-ending oppression dynamic. White, heterosexual, gender-conforming males become the oppressors of everyone else. But it doesn't stop there. Women become the oppressors of trans women oppressors of the intersex, one-legged people oppressors of no-legged people. It keeps dividing and expanding to establish the oppression dynamic in virtually every interaction and relationship. We find ourselves as both oppressed and oppressors depending on which power dynamic is at work in the moment. The purpose is to isolate, confuse, and embroil the population in continuous conflict. It's an update to Chairman Mao's red and black categories. Under Mao, all of China was successfully segregated into 10 groups, 5 red, or oppressed, and 5 black, or oppressors. Red categories included the poor, working class, and CCP or PLA members. Black categories included businessmen and landowners, bad influencers, or wrong thinkers, and conservatives. Postmodernism and its emphasis on subjective realities provided the key to broadening the range of categories into an infinite cascade of identities and identity groups. Mao's Cultural Revolution was born out of a power struggle between himself and more moderate members of the Communist Party. The West Cultural Revolution ignited in response to the uncontrolled flow of information on the internet. Barack Obama was a perfect delivery mechanism since he spoke directly to white liberals and minority groups, and his race served as a bulwark against any real criticisms of his ideas. The language was cunning. You'd miss it completely if you weren't paying attention, but it was there at full volume for careful listeners to discover. He made reference to poor folks, marginalized citizens, and minorities on a frequent basis, juxtaposing them against middle America, as if the American middle class were the source of their plight, deflecting any responsibility away from the elite economic capstone he was not only a part of, but worked for as the emblem on the machine. It spun out from there, generating vitriol between the red and black categories. Cultural Marxism proved to be the destructive force it always was, and with every tweet or Facebook post challenging state-sponsored dogma, the desire for legal protections against hate speech grew. Empathy and compassion provided cover for the restriction of inconvenient facts, an attempt to expunge the objective through claims of an effort to erase the subjective. Young people clamored to steal their own slice of victimhood in the same way students raced to join Mao's Red Guard. Middle-aged people declared their solidarity. This was their chance to stake a claim in youth culture long after their contact with it had expired. Many joined TikTok and recorded long diatribes against racism or homophobia or transphobia, although transgenderism is homophobia. This was perhaps the most excruciating aspect of all. Watching overweight suburban housewives pledge allegiance to Black Lives Matter made rational and responsible adults cringe in horror. Their desperate cries for attention alluded to a deeper dysfunction and made us question the general intellect of the millennial generation. The FBI and CIA have historically acted with the implicit intent to crush revolutionary movements. Now they were working in concert with them, and by extension, academia, legacy media, and Hollywood. The lines between American intelligence and their adjoined institutions have never been clearer. We can watch the development and delivery of propaganda messaging in real time. We can trace the chain across every point of passage all the way back to the neoconservative nucleus of the U.S. State Department. The internet pulled back the curtain on the convergence of these institutions right as they aligned. In previous years, academia and Hollywood stood in opposition to authoritarianism because it came from under the wing of Republicans. What the deep state came to understand was that they needed a new method of transmission, and they found it in the Democrats and cultural Marxism. Liberals would follow because whether through willing compliance or blind stupidity, the memory of Bush and Cheney still lingered, and that was enough to keep them constrained to their corner, despite the left's tilt toward the same autocratic behavior that activated them against Bush and Cheney to begin with. Trump, with the fictional parallels drawn between him and fascist dictators, was the perfect battering ram, pushing the left to further extremes with every swing. No matter how classically liberal his policies actually were, if his name were attached, legacy media could easily convince the left of some depraved, despotic motive, since they had repeatedly and successfully associated him with white nationalism. It was a genius maneuver pulled from the pages of Orwell. Freedom is slavery, war is peace, ignorance is strength. The total inversion of truth cultivated an alternate universe where the worst of two extremes fused to create a form of turbo-totalitarianism. Although the West's cultural revolution is Marxist, or more succinctly, Maoist, at its roots, the overarching system of control is undoubtedly fascist, as is evident in the increasingly carnal relationships between corporations and governments. The state and financial interests have become so interwoven they're now a singular entity. Governments mandate untested pharmaceutical products. Hollywood almost exclusively produces propaganda films. Banks prioritize minority groups for predatory loans. And the entire ideology is a smokescreen for the public-private partnerships forming outside of our view. We were swept into a domain governed by a military-industrial complex through the subversion of democratic values by way of manipulating our desire to aim for a greater good. Mass censorship is the linchpin to securing their new world. The American deep state needs to wrestle back control over the distribution of information, and they've muscled Canada, Australia, the UK, the EU, and much of Latin America into their authoritarian agenda. As long as we're divided by categories and the concept of hate speech is allowed to exist in a political or legal context, it will be routinely exploited as a digital guillotine to detach anyone who dare challenges their edicts from communicating or even surviving in their closed society. Free speech is integral to freedom, and freedom is intrinsic to the human experience. Without it, we become insipid drones, cut off from our connection to God, born to live and die in servitude to the noble class. And knowing this is what they fear more than anything. When the war turns hot, this will be the match that lights the wick. All right. Well, I stumbled quite a bit, but that is what it is. It was way better than it was previously, so I'm going to leave it there. First of all, I want to say I put this essay out on Substack and X last week, and it hit with a dull thud in a lot of spaces. I find that we're so focused on the culture war issues, but we're focused on the superficial aspects of them. And so whenever I go like a couple of layers deeper to the root of why, woke exists or where it comes from, I find that I just lose people. And that's concerning for me because I think that those are the important aspects that people need to understand in order to conquer this thing. I've said this many times before, but James Lindsay does an amazing job. I mean, he has literally mapped it all out from point A through Z through his New Discourses website and podcast. But I just find for myself, it's like whenever I go below the superficial and really go to the meat of this issue, I lose people, which again is really concerning because it tells me that they're not really interested in understanding where this all comes from or how to beat it, but more or less just to complain about it on social media. And I think that is I think that is the number one challenge we face is the I don't know how to say this in a nice way. Stupid people, I guess. I just find that so many of us are so, and even myself to a certain extent at sometimes, we're just not interested in learning or educating ourselves or understanding these very real and very, very dangerous threats that are surrounding us. We just want to point to the guy in the dress and say that is wrong without knowing why he's doing it or why the left is pushing it on us and our children, and forcing us to accept lifestyles that are fringe at best and near non-existent in most cases. So with this essay, I really wanted to dig in. And really, even on this essay, like, I'm only going 1 degree below the surface. There's infinite leagues. And James Lindsay has done this, ad nauseum. Like, I mean, you can go deep and deep, all the way back to Antonio Gramsci and the first transformation of Marx's original philosophy into something much more insidious. And I didn't go that far because this essay would literally be 20, 30, 40 pages if I did that. I try to keep everything to 3 to 5 pages when I write so that it's easier to digest, and I try to put things in basic language so that it's easy to understand. But yeah, there is one paragraph in here where I talk about the overweight suburban middle-aged moms pledging allegiance to Black Lives Matter, and that's a thread that I've held on to. So I think my next essay, I'm going to explore that a little more, explore our generation, the millennial generation, and Generation Z, and kind of figure out why we are in the condition that we're in, because I really feel like, just on a cultural level, Marxism aside, we're in a very bad place. And just talking about Obama, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I stopped writing for about 5 years because, I was blackballed in a few instances, but I just couldn't get. I was writing. I spotted Obama for what he was very early on. The honeymoon period after Barack Obama was elected, for me, ended very quickly, and I wrote a number of articles way back then, kind of pointing out, things that I saw that I felt were dangerous. And I got labeled a racist, and, a number of editors that I had worked with frequently decided to stop answering my calls and stop talking to me. So I took a break, and it wasn't until Substack emerged and the beginning of the pandemic that I began to write these essays again. And I could go on and on and on forever about Obama, but I think it's really, really telling to see him going so hard on the campaign trail for Kamala Harris, and Dick Cheney, who I also mentioned in this essay, endorsing Kamala Harris as well. I think this election cycle, this specific election, has been really, really, really revealing, and has really showed us who these people are. And the fact that Dick Cheney and Barack Obama are now on the same side publicly should tell you who they always were privately. And that's that. All right, guys. Thank you all for tuning in. As always, thank you for supporting the Substack. Thank you for just everything, man. I mean, fuck. I just feel so lucky that I get to do this again, and that people are reading my stuff. And even if, articles like this or essays like this one come out and kind of disappear as quick as they arrive, I'm happy to just be able to do it. And, thank you guys for your continued support. And, if you're not subscribed to my Substack yet, please subscribe. bravenewnormal.substack.com. You can subscribe for free, or you can be a paid subscriber, whichever you decide. But that's it for me. And we will see you guys on the next one. Podcast episode this week, Brave New Normal, episode 57 with JJ Carroll. We talk all about his recent documentaries, What is Treason, Trafficked and Invaded. We talk about the election, since the episode will release the day after the American election. We talked all about how illegal immigrants are being registered to vote in this year's election, and it is pretty fucking terrifying. So please tune in this Wednesday, November 6th. And that's it. That's all I got. I'm doing a terrible job of this right now, but I am doing my best. So we will see y'all later. Peace.